Yes, hello everybody. Quite importantly, can everybody hear me? Um, yeah, great. Okay, great. So we'll begin then. Hello to everybody. And yes, as we said, morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening. I'm glad that you can all hear me. So we'll get started. Okay, so we're doing creativity today. Um, Peter didn't introduce me because I'm going to give a very quick picture bio of myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up pictures one by one, and each picture represents part of my life. I'm not going to say what the pictures are. I want you to try and guess what they are. So, and then when I've got all the pictures up together, then obviously I'll tell you what the whole story is. Um, and then just remember, you can obviously do this with your learners. It's all part of this creativity. So let's begin by showing the first picture, which I think will be a very obvious one. Let's get this rolling. Okay, so there's me. Like I said, it's a very obvious one. So on to the next picture. Maybe that's very obvious as well to a lot of you. The next one I think won't be as obvious. Okay. A lot of you I know live in the same region, so you might be more familiar with where that is. I think that properly represents a picture of all of what we do. And then, yes, there we all are. Okay. Now there's a little challenge for you maybe to work out what that one was. Have any of you ever been to this place? Very, very famous place. Oops, sorry. There we are. Okay, so let's just go back to the beginning and I'll give you a quick rundown of what it is. Obviously, female, I was born in the UK, specifically in London. My mother came from England, but my father was from Cyprus, which is an island in the Mediterranean, which fits in snugly between quite a few countries, verging very closely to the Middle East, so Lebanon especially, so hello there. I trained to become a teacher, and I then traveled to many countries in the world teaching. Later on in life, I became a co-editor and started writing. And I also then became a trainer. For Cambridge University, that's one of the most famous universities in parts of the university in Cambridge, and specifically working for Cambridge Assessment with exams as an oral examiner, doing admin for exams. I'm also a teacher trainer for CELTA and have done Delta, and obviously working with Cambridge University Press. So let's go on to the workshop. Right, we're going to look at the notion of creativity. We're then going to have a look at lesson dynamics. We're going to look at some practical examples, although we have looked at one practical example already, which is the pictures, which obviously you could do with your own classes, because a picture can represent so many things, and how a person represents or looks at a picture can be interpreted in so many ways. We're going to have a look at some problems that we might encounter in this theme of creativity. We'll then have a summary, and I will be giving you a little homework task, um, because it would be nice to feel that some of these ideas, you actually practice them then in the classroom. So that would be lovely if that would happen. It's nothing too challenging. It's just to make you take away this workshop with you. And when you do finally get back into the classroom, then we'll be able to be worthwhile to feel that there's been some real benefit to this workshop.
Lydia,
Right.
sorry to interrupt you, but quite a few people are saying they can't hear you very well. So could you perhaps put the microphone closer to your mouth?
Is that better? Are people clearer now?
It's
Because
certainly clearer to me now.
I
Yeah,
can't
people
see
are
the
saying, you know, it's okay. People are saying it's clear. Thank you
I
very much.
I can't see chat. Yeah. Okay. Let's look at this idea, the notion of creativity. Right. A dot. A dot could mean anything to anybody. Um, and it could mean many different things. So, uh, one, the idea of creativity, you could say, begins with a dot, because how we see a dot is different for everybody. And also, how we use a dot can be done in so many ways. The idea of a dot is to try and get across this idea of how creativity to any one person is different. So, for example, children often do drawings called dot to dot, where, as you can see with this very simple example, they would be drawing a picture of a cat. And they join the dots, and then obviously they would be able to color the picture in colors that they wanted, but then they would also be able to draw their own dot to dot, maybe. You could then tell your children, I want you to do a picture with dots, any sort of colors, any sort of drawing, anything that you want to express a dot, how a dot is, just put it down on paper. You could get them to do dots in some baking task that you get them to do, and just design dots on them. A more festive one, like Southern Hemisphere at the moment, and dots can be used to put on eggs in a very pretty way, as in this example, to make them look much more interesting than just white or brown. And then you can get more psychedelic, maybe, and do dots maybe on the computer, using a computer. And then you can be very and creative, and then you get to like a more adult form of dots. Um, so yeah, this is just an example of how dots can be used. This idea of creativity is different for everybody. Right, going on to this dot, let's have a look at ages. Now, very often we look at our children, and we maybe don't understand at what stage their level of creativity actually develops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 4 different age groups, because I am sure that you all teach very different age groups. And think about which of these age groups you think has the greatest level of creativity. So I'll give you 4 different stages of education. So we've got the 3 to 6 year olds. Then we've got the 6 to 8 year olds. Then we've got the 8 to 10 year olds, and then we've got the 10 to 12 year olds. Now, if you put these if you match each of these um, to one of the categories on the right hand side, which of the 4 categories on the left would you match to the categories on the right? I'll just give you a very quick minute to do that. Okay, so it wasn't me that did the research on whether or not which age group is the exact age group in which develops creativity. And maybe you will disagree with the answer that I'm going to give. Um, but yes, actually, the age where the main period of creativity is, we're not saying that the other stages children don't have creativity. It's just the peak of the creativity is actually C in their second cycle of primary, so the 8 to 10-year-olds. And please, like I said, this isn't rigid because obviously children develop in very different ways. Some might do it earlier, some might do it later, but just as a guideline, that's the main period of creativity for most children. Okay, now let's move on to about this level of creativity. When we talk about creativity, we're going to think about now what hinders creativity in any person. When you think of your own context and the children in your classroom, and think about what is it about these children that maybe hinders what they can do. Shall I just give you a minute just to think about what you think might hinder creativity? Like, for example, just as an example, you could say the use of a lot of games at the moment. Children don't actually use their own imagination to create anymore. It's all very focused on what's in front of them. Okay, so just have a quick think, and then I will come up with some ideas of other ideas for you to look at. Okay, I'm going to show you 6 options. Of the 6 options, 2 of them don't hinder creativity. So out of the 6 options, 4 of them hinder, but 2 of them don't. So have a look and decide which of the 4 hinder creativity and then which 2 don't. And then we'll have a talk about all of them together. Okay, so everybody, great. So shall we have a look at those together? And we'll go over them one by one. Okay, so following the same order and same space for class activities. All right, so looking at people's answers, yes, this one was covered. All right, think about a classroom where you go in and you say to the children, right, children, get out your course books. And that's like the first activity. Right, open the course book on page 29. All right, let's start with exercise 5. Yes, I just saw somebody say number one definitely kills creativity. Exactly, exactly. Good. This is exactly what we want. Yes, it does kill creativity because it's like the children, they come into the classroom and everything is so predictive. They're not expecting anything different from what they're actually doing. So, yes, well done. Definitely number one does hinder creativity. Okay, number two, yes, that's right. It doesn't hinder us. I can see some people are getting, yes, this is great. Think about it. If you leave a bit of space in your lessons, whether it's at the end of an activity, whether it's at the end of the lesson, whether it's at the end of the week, if you just leave a bit of space where children can actually then bring in a bit of their themselves into the lesson and do what they want, it would be really great because then that would allow both you and the students to have a bit of freedom in what they do. And this is where we would bring in something creative and be able to do more creative activities in the classroom. Right, number three, looking at number three, showing learners a sample of the activity. Now, one thing which is very important and which we do on teacher training courses is we always say that you have to give an example to your students because it's only then will the students be able to understand exactly the task. Uh, so this one is a bit of a difficult one because yes, it does hinder creativity because then you're very much setting what you want your students to do. But then again, from there, if you did want them to be creative, you could like then give them options of where they could go from there. Or if it was an activity where you wanted them to stick to, then obviously it would be then an example of what the other exercises would be. But yes, number three, it does basically limit their creativity, definitely. So yes. Number four, giving young learners very clear instructions. Um, very, very important. I think we all agree. But yes, I can see that people also understand that, yes, nonetheless, it does restrict and hinder creativity. Good instructions, very, very important, followed by a good, clear example, all very good if you want your students to perform a task well. There's no, somebody said you don't need to give an example. I would like to disagree. I think it's always good whether you give the example or you get one of your students to give an example to make sure that they're doing exactly the task that you want them to do. But obviously with creativity, then no, it's not a part of this. Number five, I think we're quite easy to understand that number five really restricts creativity. Um, as a teacher trainer, it's quite frightening how many classrooms that I've been into where this is very much part of the lesson. And yes, always limitation. What is number five? When you go into a class and you have a set way of doing your lessons. Now, I know as teachers, we're not always free to do what we want in a lesson, and often, and many schools will restrict their teachers in what they do and how they do it, and they give them a very set way of doing what they want. In this lesson you've got to do this lesson you've got to do that, which obviously makes time for the teacher very, very limited. And yes, repetition can be very boring, and I agree with whoever commented that it is sometimes necessary nonetheless. I think you'll agree all of these are necessary, but not in the context of creativity. Right, the last point, listening to learners' interests. Yes, learners' involvement is a must, and that's one thing that we're really trying to get across here, about we want our learners involved in the lessons as much as possible. Right, let's go on to the next screen and have a look at why is creativity important in the classroom. Okay, creativity is a significant learning experience. Okay, in what way? Think about your students and the language that they're learning. Think about the words they choose, the words they put together, how they put together, how they would choose one adjective over another adjective, how they would choose something, an image over another image. So in that sense, we've got to look at the students by forming sentences or anything, descriptions. It's all part of the creative learning experience. And then don't make it easy for them. Don't give everything half done. This is what we're saying about giving that bit of freedom, because by restricting everything, you're not giving that bit of element of creativity. So don't make things too easy for them, because if you do, they're not visualizing and trying to do things in their own way. Work from what they want to learn. Try and make it so that there's a bit more student involvement in your lessons. Try and bring in some of their ideas, whether it's their immediate environment or a topic that they're generally interested in. Let their interests guide the lesson. Maybe there's something that they are interested in talking about. Maybe there's something that they are aware of this week that they're very, very interested in, and they want to talk about it in the lesson. Maybe, at the beginning of the week, have a box and get them to put all their ideas into that box and say that right at the end of the week or at the end of the lesson, we're going to include some of your ideas in this lesson, and then maybe think about how you're going to do that as well. Yes, exactly. Somebody said even involving them to decide on the activities. We'll have a look at that as well. So yes, thank you very much for that input. So yes, let them guide the lesson. Let the teacher become more of a facilitator rather than the teacher, the dominant person in the classroom. Have you ever thought about recording yourselves while you're teaching to see how much you're actually dominating, or how much you actually control your learners in what they do and what they say, etc.? Even like decide the linguistic content. Right, today, what words would you like to learn about? Maybe they will say, today we want to do all words connected with football, or all words connected with animals. And you could think about how you could bring in that language throughout the week that you're with them. Switching roles, somebody said, yes, that's a lovely idea, where let them have complete control of the classroom. Yes, great. Never forget, as I'm sure you don't, we have all types of learners, and we need to make sure that we bring in all these different types of learners, whether it's bringing in music, imagery, feeling, drawing, just so that we accept that everybody learns in a different, yes, we do. We need to cater for all their needs and accept that everybody learns in a different way. Some people like to sit and look at an exercise and work quietly on your own, but many other learners learn in a very different way. So we need to respect and deal with that. Right. Okay, classroom resources. Have a look around your class, have a look around outside your class, have a look around on your way to school. You know, bring all of these into the lesson. You could say at the end of one lesson, right, children, tomorrow I'm going to tell you the word water. And I want you all to walk into school tomorrow, and on your way to school, just take a picture or pick up something that represents the word water to you. Just use everything around us. Whether it, like I said, whether it's within the classroom or everything around us, just to give children this ability to start looking uh, around them. This is one thing I'm very aware of, is how children now, because they're so focused on their phones, um, people, so they've lost this ability to look around them and just to appreciate the leaves on the trees, the drops of water maybe after it's rained, this sort of thing. So yes, let's bring in everything around us. Does anybody have any other classroom resources that they would like to share with us, that they use every day when they want to bring in creativity into the classroom? Yes, sand is a lovely one, because there's so many different grades of sand, isn't there? Yoga mats, wow. Okay, yes. Diaries, flashcards, yes. Flowers or animals, puppets, plastic bottles. I'd love to see how plastic bottles can be used. Handicraft, yes, is a beautiful one. And yes, placemats and Play-Doh. So, thank you, they're all really lovely, lovely ideas. And it's like when you see the cell phones, when you see all these lovely ideas, it's like we've got a generation of amazingly creative students, human beings coming into the world for the next generation, which is absolutely lovely. Okay, let's move on to lesson dynamics. Okay, like we talked about before, obviously how we do a task is very, very important. So to teach or to be creative, we must look at the dynamics created in the classroom. And by that, we should be looking at the types of tasks we give our learners, and also the way we are explaining them. Okay, we're going to have a look at some examples of what I mean by this, rather than letting you try and work it out. Right, think about all the sort of task types that a teacher does, a language teacher does in the classroom. Right, I'm going to give you a list of many of these task types, and some of them I think you will agree naturally encourage creativity, but a lot of them again hinder creativity. So what we're going to look at is how we can do this. So there's one. All right, so there you can see the list, and I think it's very obvious. I can see from your answers, yes, limited, but I can't see what others say. Sorry. Okay. So you'll agree that crafts, flashcard games, storytelling, role plays, theatre plays, games, etc. Yes, they all very much encourage creativity, and they don't need very much explanation, do they? But if we look at things like dictations, fill in the gaps, course book activities, um, these very much can hinder. And I've actually seen teachers where they do a dictation and the lesson starts with, right, we're going to do the dictation today. All right, get your books out and let's write the words that I gave you for homework yesterday. So the students get out their books, teacher reads the words, the students write the words, the teacher then goes around and checks that the words are correct, are correct. Um, uh, but more recently, dictation, I don't know, is becoming very much in vogue, if in fashion again. And if you go online or if you find books, there's so many different variations now on how you can make dictation a dynamic and interesting activity in your lesson. And it's this way that you're, because the students aren't expecting to come and do everything the same over and over again, it sort of inspires their brains. And it's like, right, how are we going to do dictation today? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at dictation, and then I'm going to look at fill in the gaps, just to give some examples of how these two particular activities or task types can be used in a much more varied way. And while I've been talking, I can see that people have actually got some very, very good ideas. Actually, I think it's not necessary for me to even have this workshop. We've got some amazingly creative teachers out there anyway, so well done. Anyway, so let's have a look at an example of how dictation can be made a much more dynamic activity. Okay, so imagine that you've got your students and they've come in to do their dictation. You've obviously given the language in advance. You're right. Now, children, I want you to listen. Put your pen and pencils down. Don't write. I just want you to listen to the dictation. Just listen. You will then read out the passage or the sentences. And I think when you hear the 5 sentences that I've got, that the language that I'm trying to reinforce here, so that the 5 sentences would be, there are orange flowers, there is a butterfly, there is a bee near the flowers, there is a long earthworm, there are 3 ants. Okay, so the language I was reinforcing there was obviously there are, countable and uncountable nouns, and obviously there was a focus on insects. The next stage of this activity would be to give the students a picture that represents all of the sentences that I just read out. I would then tell my students to, in pairs, to look at this picture and to create as many of the sentences that I just read out to them. And they would then actually write the sentences in their pairs. Okay, once they've done that, I would then read it again. I would then read the 5 sentences again, where they could then check their sentences. And up to here, I haven't been checking anything that they're doing, maybe just monitoring to check that they are doing the activity correctly. I would then give them a little gap fill. And this is one way where they could then check that they have actually spelt the words correctly and used the correct language. There is, there are. And then they could then check their answers together. Okay. And when you think like here, the role of the teacher, you're just there to read. It wouldn't have to be the teacher. You could actually get maybe the students to read. Okay, so this is one example of how we could vary dictation. Another example, imagine you've got your students practicing the past continuous were, driving, drove, and the past simple, etc. What you would do is you would give student A the first list and then student B the second list, get them to sit facing each other or back to back, with the idea that you don't want them looking at the other person's list. Um, the student then reads their list to the other student. So A would read the words on their list and B would write the words that A read to them, and then the same with B. You could also vary this. Maybe it could become more of a class thing, and you would allocate one word or phrase to each student, um, and they read them out loud to the class, who then write them down. You could also do that with the passage as well, of course, where everybody's given a small part of a sentence which they read, rearrange, and then they've got to write it down. There's so many variations. You could also give them a text, read it, and they've got to choose which was the correct word. And also, you could actually have text where where there are mistakes, and they've got to rewrite the text that you dictate to them, but with a variation, with the correct answer. So they're just I mean, somebody said they can be done in secondary level. Uh, yes, of course, they can be done at any level you want. And yes, these examples which I've been given are from the Primary Path series book. Okay, so let's have a look at fill the gaps. Okay, so students could draw in the missing word. Obviously, here the focus is the verb. All right, so get them to draw, or you know, if they don't want to draw individually, you could get somebody up on the board and you know, do it like that. That's another variation of fill the gaps. You could get students to learn the words in common pairs, and maybe like have the words on individual cards, and they then have to find the matching pair, or write the matching pair, or draw the matching pair, and match it. So like girl and boy. It's a bit more difficult with abstract, like more or less, but that's where the cards, like you play a snap, a game, or stick them on the board, like somebody said, and they rearrange them and do it like that. Another example, a coded close example, using the alphabet. So the girls are eating, so the second letter of the alphabet is obviously B. The first letter of the alphabet is A. So obviously this is the girls are eating a banana. And it just brings in a different kind way of doing each of these activities, which, like we said, they can be quite restrictive, but if you try and bring in variations, it really does change the dynamics of the lesson. Okay, another example which really encourages creativity. Um, in the books, The Primary Path, if you can see at the bottom there, look at the name and draw the dinosaurs. I think you'll agree that all children love dinosaurs, and drawing dinosaurs, there's a sort of fascination about them. So you can see at the bottom, there's a little dinosaur called a Pandasaurus. Um, and the example that's being given is the person has drawn a dinosaur that's a cross between a dinosaur and a panda. And then the student is then given the opportunity to draw their own sort of dinosaur. So as you can see, love ice creamosaurus, So yes, so they could draw a dinosaur that represents a dinosaur that loves ice cream, scared of spiders after, curl up in a balloon, or you choose a saurus, just one that they just want to completely create on their own. Uh, what would be the purpose of this? Absolutely no reason but pleasure and creativity. They just come up with completely their own ideas. Yes, and yes, they do. And another example, this is a much more with levels where language is involved. You can see what's in the box. Now you can see around the box, there's question forms. Um, and as an example, you would say, right, children, I've drawn something, and in my books there is this, and the children would then have to ask these questions in order to find out what the teacher had drawn in her books. So if the students were to say, does it make a noise? No. If anybody can guess what my picture is, then please let me know. Can you eat it? Yes. Is it heavy? No. Is it dangerous? No. Is it a living thing? No. And yes, it's not a computer or anything. What color is it? In my particular case, it's pink and white. Is it for children? Yes, it is specifically, really. What shape is it? Well, mine, it's rectangular. And is it something you can buy in a store? Yes. So what Lydia drew in her box was a sweet. Ah, somebody said marshmallow. So very good ideas. So yes, so that's just where, and obviously the children would draw whatever is in their books, and then again that other children would have to ask these questions to find out what was in the child's box. And yes, of course, they could then color it. Okay, so moving on from some of these practical ideas, problems we might encounter when we try and bring in creativity. Um, Personally, I'm not a very creative person and I'm constantly kicking myself about it, but there's so many lovely ideas, and just talking to other teachers. I mean, I can see from, all the input that I'm getting here that by talking to your colleagues, you get so many wonderful, wonderful ideas from other people. I was recently in Bahrain with some teachers, and one was a geography teacher, and she came up with this most wonderful idea of how to bring color into her geography lessons. And I was like, you look at these people and you think how wonderful their lessons must be, and how much I envy her students. Hello from Bahrain, yes. Okay, and yes, very often students aren't used to being to be creative, and that's where we are so important, where we really need to bring in a lot of, at least think about, try and integrate it somehow into your lessons, because it is such an important part of learning, such an important part. uh, Somebody says you need to be a creative teacher. I disagree, and I hope a lot of what we've been looking at suggests that we don't need to be creative, because there are so many ideas out there that will help you um, become creative and look at things in a different way. Um, how much they learn is entirely up to us. How much we want to bring this creativity into the classroom is so much up to us. So let's try and start think about bringing a bit of it into the lesson. Yes, it might be more difficult in ELT, because very often we are so limited as teachers in how much time we've got to teach our students. very often you've only got a certain number of lessons in the curriculum, etc., etc. But nonetheless, let's at least think about how we can integrate it. And yes, of course, as most things, preparation time, that's always a big thing, isn't it, when you're a teacher? Capacity to adapt and improvise, that's where it's important for us. We need to adapt and we need to improvise and we need to feel, right, I'm going to start doing this in my lessons. And yes, like we talked about before, class routines, class structure, it's not always in our power, but then we all have to do dictation. So, you know, think next time, how can I make my dictation different? And already you're starting to think, how can I bring creativity into my lesson? Group behavior, yes, students think because it's fun, it's not learning, and maybe parents and the authorities might think that as well. So that's another obstacle which needs to be dealt with. Right, very quick summary, one that's going to challenge you though. Okay, here's the stem. How quickly can you match the column, the blue column with the pink column? Just a very quick review of what we've done today. I'll give you a very quick minute to do that. I think I better time you because we're getting short of time here. So don't provide what? Don't provide what? What's the correct answer? Anyone? Don't provide, lovely. Don't provide many examples or samples of the task. Excellent. Keep going, keep going. See how many of them you can come up with. You're still on number one. Move on to number two. Use everything. Absolutely great. Number three. I'll give you the answers afterwards. Don't worry. Yeah. Come on, number three. All right, we're stuck on number three. Generate a classroom environment. Great. Number four, age. Number four. Okay, I'll give you the answers. Okay, so here's a quick summary of what we've covered today. Okay, so don't provide many examples or samples. Remember, we said because it does ultimately restrict the creativity. Use everything and anything available inside and outside the classroom. Generate a classroom environment appropriate to practice creativity. Imagine how it feels to walk into a classroom that's just black and white. Get your students to walk into a classroom with music, with color, where you vary the layout of the desks with different pictures, all your work, etc., etc. Remember we said between 8 and 10 is the most productive age. Remember, dynamics is such an important part of enhancing this creativity. Okay, and finally, adapt and improvise with your learners. Bring them into the classroom. Now, finally, I've got a homework task for you. I would love to feel that you did this. It would be really wonderful. So, post-session task. This is for you to practice when you go back into the classroom. And I hope to everybody that's very, very soon. And good luck to everybody. Okay, to self-evaluate the implementation of new classroom dynamics that foster your learners' creativity. Revise a typical lesson plan. So think of a lesson that you've already got planned, okay? Think of the class because you know them well and who you're going to be doing it with. Now, when you look at your lesson plan, ask yourself, is learner thinking time included, even if it's a couple of minutes or at different stages of the lesson or for different tasks? Think about it. Is it based on their likes or is it something they've got no understanding or concept of? Try and bring in them into your classroom. Are there any group or pair work activities? Why? Because yes, because they're working together and forming ideas and thinking about things, and as such, they're being creative because the dynamics is actually coming from them. Uh, will the students be engaged? Will they want to do the lesson? Will they want to contribute? Will they go out of that class thinking, wow, that's really useful? Did they make any decisions during the lesson? Okay, right. And
Hi,
how?
Lydia. Sorry to disturb.
Yes,
We have only 7 minutes left for the
yes.
session.
I
Yeah,
actually have finished. Thank you very much, Raz. Thank you.
no problem.
And how have the tasks been approached? Basically, we're saying, look at your dynamics. Yeah, think, how am I doing this today? Am I doing this the same as I've always done it, or differently? All right. So this is to have before you go into the lesson. I don't know if you want to take a quick snapshot of that, anybody? Very, very quickly. So you've got it to take with you. But these will be going online, but I'm not sure when. Okay. And then after you've done the lesson, self-reflection. Okay. Right. Think about this. Did they make an effort to create and produce something new? And if they did, well, then 100% congratulations on you. Which activities did they enjoy the most? Why did they enjoy them the most? What was it about them that they enjoyed? Were the tasks varied and engaging? Did they bring anything of themselves into the classroom? Did they have enough guidance, or were they floundering around? Because obviously initially, if this is a new concept, then it's something which is going to be taking a while. And what would you do in the future? So these are self-evaluation for you as a teacher. And I would really love to feel that some of it was integrated. And I would also like to say thank you very, very much to everybody for participating. Hopefully I'll see you next week when I'm doing a webinar on challenges. So thank you to everybody, and the